Toby, thanks for joining us. What are your thoughts on Geoffrey Hinton's resignation?
Yes, well, Geoffrey Hinton is a huge name in AI, and especially deep learning. He was one of the people who pioneered the approach of backpropagation, which is how a neural network learns, and also deep neural networks, having very many layers in order for them to be able to learn more complex concepts. So it's hard to get a bigger name in AI than Geoffrey Hinton. And he's resigned from Google in part so that he can feel free to talk about the risks that this technology that he's helped develop might pose.
And what do you make of that? I mean, do you think that actually AI does pose these kind of risks that he's warning about?
I think that it could. This is an area where there's a very wide range of opinion among AI researchers. But the deep concerns about the risks of AI are rising within that community. And something like half of the foremost AI researchers have now gone on the record expressing concerns that human extinction could be a possible consequence of the technology that they're developing, or some permanent disempowerment of humanity at the hands of AI systems. The other half, many of them are also very concerned about risks that could be posed, although they think that they're of a different kind and smaller, albeit still large risks to do with discrimination and bias and concentration of power and things along those lines.
You mentioned their human extinction rather casually. Talk us through that. How exactly are we all going to die because of AI?
Yeah, I think in some ways the best way to think of it, well, here are a few ways to think of it. So one is that the reason that it's humans that are calling the shots on planet Earth at the moment, and where the fate of other species are ultimately up to us, is because of our intelligence and generally our cognitive abilities, our ability to work with each other to achieve goals. And what we're planning on doing, or at least the AI researchers are, is developing new entities that are better than us at this unique attribute. So I think the default pathway there, unless we do anything to prevent it, would be that it's ultimately these new things that are calling the shots. So that's one way to look at it. And then if you say, well, what can you do in order to ensure that they're aligned with our interests, or that they can always obey our instructions? That the people who are working on that particular part of artificial intelligence, called AI alignment research, that they're actually leading the concern that we're not going to be able to develop those techniques in time, and that we'll have systems that are more powerful than us before we have systems that we know how to control.
And Hinton in his interview asks us to think about, a baby with a mother in terms of, is that a sort of useful analogy in terms of the control relationship, and also perhaps the sense of, innocence or naivety in terms of how little we know compared to what AI would know?
Yeah, it's a complex one because the sense in which an infant controls their parents is quite complicated, and it's not that they're planning to do so or something like that. But he's right to raise this question about how often can a less intelligent entity control the more intelligent one without the more intelligent one eventually wresting that control away. Another example that he could have used perhaps is maybe a very intelligent criminal who's been captured and put in prison can then be controlled ultimately by the state and not able to escape from the prison due to an asymmetry in the position that the prisoner is now in where they've been captured. So there could be something like that as well, where effectively, because we can design the constraints that our AI systems are in, that by designing those constraints and the types of actions they're allowed to take and so on, and by being able to observe those actions and log them, that's another way that we could hope to have some upper hand over a system that's more powerful than us. And we may also be able to design its goals in an accurate way so that it's aiming to achieve the types of things that lead to our flourishing, which would be another hope for controlling a more intelligent system. Although, as I said, that one seems to be very difficult to do.
And we're talking here in the UK now, but how do different regimes around the world compare in terms of their kind of framework here? I mean, are some countries pulling ahead? Presumably America is one of them with AI. What are the kind of different nations' approaches to AI?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it's pretty similar among the leading researchers on AI. There are a few leading labs working on what's called artificial general intelligence, and these are the types of systems that would aspire to be able to do the wide range of tasks that a human could do, and to be able to do it as well or better than a human, such as DeepMind here in London, and also OpenAI and Anthropic in Silicon Valley. So they are working on, among other things, training these large language models. And so that's these chatbots and systems that can read the entire internet and then give seemingly intelligent responses to the types of questions that we ask them and the tasks that we set for them.
And I mean, in this piece, Hinton suggests we could reach artificial general intelligence with about 20 years. How realistic a timescale is that? Because many people's experience of ChatGPT might be, it's interesting, it's a useful guide, but they can't see really how that kind of evolves over the next few years and decades.
Yeah, I mean, there is this challenge here, and in the interview, I see that Hinton acknowledges it, that we don't want to just reason from ignorance to say we can't see how it would get there, so therefore it can't get there. But nor do we want to just assume the opposite. Ultimately, we need to acknowledge that we're in a position of quite deep uncertainty whenever it comes to predicting the pathway of a rapidly developing technology. And I think that what some people don't recognize is that the uncertainty doesn't mean that you're entitled to believe whatever you want to believe. And similarly, the diversity of opinion among AI researchers doesn't mean that they can have any opinion they want and just take it to the grave. Ultimately, we need to acknowledge that there is a great deal of uncertainty and disagreement about what's going to happen, and that we don't know how to take possibilities such as human extinction off the table at the moment, and that's deeply alarming, even if we're not saying that it's certain to happen.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned there about the disagreement, and we've spoken about how half the community seems to be very divided and hostile about this. Yet, I mean, despite Hinton's resignation earlier this week causing headlines, there were lots of news stories about it, it seems we're racing ahead regardless, even though, as you say, half of the sort of community involved with this are deeply opposed. Just will this resignation have any effect? And what really is going to slow down this race to AI? Because where I'm standing, I can't really see anything stopping it.
That's a good question. And as Hinton mentions, part of the concern is a certain kind of race dynamic. There is that when Microsoft launched their new Bing, which I think was something of a fiasco, but it's in an attempt to outdo Google at search, which is Google's core product. It then kind of forced Google's hand to deploy systems that it was previously not deploying, and that triggering a race between these huge corporations to develop, better and better AI systems as quickly as possible. And we saw with Bing that it was really not ready for prime time. It was definitely not aligned with human interests. I mean, it was the first AI system to threaten to kill an AI ethics researcher. And also, in terms of journalism, it threatened an AP journalist. It threatened to expose them for war crimes, which they, as far as I know, had not committed, because it had written a bad story about Bing, which Bing assumed must be false because it was taught to believe that it was always correct about things. So these are, sci-fi plot lines, right? That have become real. Now, this system, while it threatens revenge on people who say bad things about it on the internet, it can't fulfill that revenge. And probably it's not going to kill anyone. But I don't think we can wait until people are killed by an AI system before we actually try to regulate it or at least take some serious steps. Otherwise, people are going to get killed before we take action.
Well, on that cheery note, thank you very much, Toby, for joining us today.